When someone says the word tank in a game, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? It's usually some heavy, bulky person wearing a bunch of armor, big weapons, big shields, whatever. And they're usually the ones standing in the front line, taking a bunch of hits, protecting their allies. That's the job of a tank. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's start by codifying what being a tank actually means. First, you need to be able to take a hit. Second, you need to make enemies want to attack you, because otherwise they're just going to hit your squishy backline and you're doing nothing with your ability to take hits. You're protected, not a tank. Third, you need to force enemies to waste time. Because if you cannot force enemies to waste time, you're not slowing down the pace of the game, you're not buying your allies any time to do things, so you're kind of failing in your job as a tank. These are the three essential things that you need to be a tank. And if you think about a game like World of Warcraft, and the warrior class specifically, they're able to take a hit, they have taunts to make enemies want to attack them, and those taunts and them resisting all the damage makes enemies waste time. Perfect. That is kind of what we're looking for here. So, let's go discuss how this translates to PF2. So, first, be able to take a hit. First class that comes in mind for most people would be the Barbarian, because they have this funny little thing up at the top of their class here. Hit points, 12 plus your Constitution modifier. That sounds like they can take a hit, right? Well, not exactly here in Pathfinder land. It is true in D&D land that they are the best tanks, just generally, in 5e at least, because they have so much health and bulk, because their rage makes them bulkier. But here, rage makes Barbarians squishier, which thus puts them on the same bulk tier as the other marshals. So they don't really have extra bulk because they're lowering their armor class in order to use their primary damage dealing ability. So, then you can also look at things like Fighter, Champion, they have these good armor classes and all this other stuff here with the 10 HP per level and all that good stuff. You know, great. The marshals generally can take hits better than the casters can. So, if you're building a tank, you're usually looking at a martial class, unless you're doing a specific type of build, which I might get into in a later video, not this one. Anyway. Now, that second thing. Make enemies want to attack you. Barbarian, again, succeeds here really well, because you remember how I said they make themselves squishier? That makes a lot of people want to attack them, but, that also makes a lot of people want to attack your wizard. That doesn't mean it's a good idea to make your wizard your tank. I'm just saying. So, it's usually not the best idea to have Barbarian mono tank because they can go down pretty easily because the AC lowers, they get crit more often, crits hurt bad in this game. So, you know, ouch. Other classes that have interesting ways of forcing people to attack them is Fighter with Attack of Opportunity. Funnily enough, does make enemies want to attack them because you can put distance between yourself and your allies. They don't want to move away from you without eating that Attack of Opportunity. So a fighter with a breach weapon can control more of the battlefield, take up some space. Pretty interesting. And Champion also makes enemies want to hit them because, specifically the good line champions, have a bunch of reactions that trigger when an enemy damages your ally. So if you're standing near your allies in the middle of them, they're going to want to hit your allies. They're going to want to hit you with the heavy armor, with the shield, etc., etc. So that's usually how people deal with that one. So it's that last one. Force enemies to waste time that usually causes the biggest issue, because you don't usually get stuns from class chassis alone. You don't normally get stuff that just interacts and interrupts the action economy from that stuff alone. Spellcasters can from their, well, spells that they cast, and you might be able to say Demoralize does it, but I think there's one more little trick, a little spicy thing, and that is, of course, grappling. This is a video about the wrestler archetype. But how can you say such a thing? Why would no weapon be a valid choice? And, well, it comes down to a pretty simple fact. In the building creatures rules, creatures tend to have strength and weaknesses. And a lot of these creatures tend to have a weakness that is either weak fortitude or weak reflex, depending on the type of creature. Because things like the Brute will have far weaker reflex saves, and very high fortitude, maybe lower AC as well. Things like the Soldier have low reflex, things like the Skirmisher have high reflex but low fortitude, same with the Sniper. So usually you can get the creatures by focusing on both them, and as an unarmed character, you have access to Grapple, targeting fortitude, and you have access to Trip, targeting reflex. So already you're able to target much more saves than a normal martial would. And normally, this targeting of different saves thing is reserved for casters that are picking their spells right. So you already have this very powerful thing that's maybe giving you like a +3 if you're playing your cards perfectly. So there's already like a pretty valid way of getting these activities off, but what do you actually get from these activities? Is that worth putting in my main actions and putting in my attack actions I can use to put damage on them? Because, damage kills things. Damage ends fights. If someone's going to compete with my main damage action, I better be getting my money's worth. For that, I'm going to talk about exactly what the conditions you're getting do to them. So, for grabbed, you're making them flat-footed. That is flat-footed to everything. Range spell attacks, range martial attacks, melee strikes, does not matter. They are flat-footed to it. And it's usually pretty difficult, like a gunslinger would need to spend extra actions and extra skills that they might fail in order to get flat-footed normally. This just gives it to them for free. They have it now. And it also requires them to attempt to escape to get out of your grapple. And escape, fun fact, also has the attack trait. So now if they want to get out of your grapple, they're going to need to burn their primary actions to do so as well. So suddenly, you're now doing that waste time thing. And if they just choose to attack somebody else's allies, you could be one of the classes that can just deal with that, and that's pretty interesting. So already, there's a way for you to slow down the pace of the game quite a lot by getting this grapple off. But, some enemies might have high fortitude. So what do you get from tripping an enemy? Well, you get the prone condition. And when they are prone, they have a -2 on attacks, they're still flat-footed to everything, they can only move by crawling or standing. Note what action is missing there. They cannot step. Attack of opportunity just got much, much better. So if you have allies with attack of opportunity, having somebody be prone is a way for them to just get another full accuracy attack off. It's not your character doing damage directly, but you put an enemy in a spot where they have this nasty debuff on them for a long time, or they're going to be taking a good amount of damage. Mind you, if they stand, your attack of opportunity resolves after because of an extra roll in Chapter 9. I'm not going to worry about that here. That might be a topic for another video where I talk about obscure rulings. But you already have these very powerful conditions just baseline by being a grapple trip character. And your damage loss isn't that much. You still have a D4 agile main strike, unless you have a class feature that makes that better, because a champion following a deity with unarmed strike like Aurori would have D6 fist. Monk, D6 fist. Animal barbarian can get a D10 unarmed attack. So you can still have a damaged weapon as a backup strategy when you're doing something like this. Anyway, let's now talk about the actual archetype, the star of the show, Wrestler. And so it starts with this dedication feat, which has a bunch of very easy prerequisites. The only one a character won't have by default at picking any class is this trained in athletics thing. And if you're building a grappler and you aren't trained in athletics, what are you doing? That was a long enough pause. Anyway, so this one does quite a few things for you that are all nice little things to have, and a couple big ones. The biggest of these is you become an expert in athletics. You usually can't get expert until level 3, and this lets you get expert in 2 skills, so you can have intimidation to be able to target every single defensive style on an enemy, or something like medicine to then be able to trick out healing as fast as another character could. So you could have battle medicine and have some healing on your tank as well. Also pretty solid, because if you have the open offhand, you might as well use it to slap a band-aid in somebody's forehead. And it gives you Titan Wrestler, which you were going to want anyway, so nice to get it without having to spend another skill feat on it. You can make lethal attacks with your non-lethal unarmed attacks, which also good because some constructs are immune to non-lethal damage, so nice to just be able to say, I'm actually doing lethal damage. It's relevant and good. In addition, you gain a bonus to Fortitude DC when resisting attempts to grapple you or swallow you whole. Barely relevant flavor text, but when it is relevant, it's very funny to tell your GM that this feat actually gave you even more stuff than they remembered. Speaking from experience. But what do you actually get from this beyond the dedication feat? And in my opinion, there are 2 main feats you should be looking at in this archetype. The first one is Combat Grab here. What Combat Grab does is it's press, so this cannot be your first attack, but it lets you strike, and then if it hits, they are automatically grabbed. Now, let's say you're fighting a brute, and a brute is one of the basic creature outlines in the Building Creatures document. I can just show you. Here, brute has high extreme strength modifier, blah 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 blah. High fortitude, but low AC. Now, how could we abuse that? We're a grappler. We want to get them grabbed. But if only there's a way we could target this AC instead of the fortitude and get the grab condition on them to activate the rest of our archetype, If only there was such a thing that could do that. that's where it comes in handy. It's very, very useful in that circumstance. Or if you're something like a fighter, this lets you get your increased fighter accuracy that's so much bigger than everybody else and actually use that for something. It lets you mark damage while you're grappling, which is also extremely powerful. So that's one of the big feats here. The other one, in my opinion, is suplex. Same thing, but for reflex. If you have somebody grabbed, and they didn't bother escaping because escaping is really big loss in action economy, you're going to have to release them at the end of your turn anyway, so you might as well first action suplex them. Now, they are prone. And we've already talked about how dangerous the prone condition can be, but now they're prone on the ground. Oh, and you're still next to them. Oh, and prone makes them flat-footed. Man, I wonder what strike I can do as my second action that would really put them into a tough spot. Because, you know, if only the prone and grab conditions could stack, thus forcing them to waste 2 of their actions if they want to actually get away from me. Good thing that's really, really hard for us to do, right? Good thing you can't do that and get both at level 4 with free archetype, right? That's a good thing, right? Anyway. So, you have these things, and that lets you effectively perpetually stunlock an enemy no matter what your main class chassis was. Just by taking these few wrestler feats, you can turn anything to a stunlock brigade. And if you're something like a druid wild shaping to an animal companion, the animal forms still strike. You can still use those feats. You can still suplex as an owlbear. I don't care. The game doesn't care. Combat grab as an owlbear. Do it. What's your GM gonna do? Stop you? Just target the weak save of the GM, you know? I bet they're a nerd. They have low fortitude. Go do it. Anyway. So, I'm not as big of a fan of the type of build that is all the crush and grab stuff. Simply because if you're main grappling somebody, I feel like you're already giving up damage to target a weaker thing, and I'd much rather be combat grabbing to get my grab condition on them, but it's still a valid option if you want to go for the build that is way more skill focused, and that might be better for Gish caster builds, because they have that lower strike accuracy, but everybody can progress athletics to legendary at 15, so you don't really lose as much accuracy by going for the skill route if you're doing the caster and armor type wrestler build. So, some note from that front. I'm not as big a fan of that type of thing, but there is one more feat I want to give a shout out here, and that is Whirling Throw. This is normally a monk feat. You get access to it at level 8. Just going to scroll up a little bit so you can see level 8 you gain access to it from this archetype. Monks normally gain access much, much earlier, but we're going to need to wait a bit longer and that's fine, because it has one trait that's very notably missing, and that's the attack trait. This is a damage dealing thing that redirects an enemy a lot, but it doesn't count as an attack. And now, I didn't even mention Shove earlier, because I feel like Shove is very, very situational. Like, people say it as if it's this really big thing, but I've always found it to be too conditional to really be useful, because normally if I'm playing a melee character, I want to keep them in melee near me, and don't want to use my primary attack actions, just move them 1 square. But Whirling Throw does not move them 1 square. It moves them a lot more than 1 square. You can throw the creature distant up to 10 feet plus 5 times your strength modifier. So that means, if you are, let's say, 19 strength or 18 strength, because you've been maxing out your strength as either a caster or martial, whatever, when you take this feat at level 8, you'll have the plus 4 modifier, throw them 30 feet on a success. What? You can just throw them. And if your GM likes to have things like hit traps or lava or spikes on their battle map, haha, you're in the middle of it now. And then they're going to need to then walk back over to you. You know, if you critically succeed, it lands prone. So then they need to spend action standing, and action walking to you, and now they're back in melee. And, you know, if you do like a really big fun combo on them, and you just want to like get them away from you to waste more of their time coming over to you, again, on that topic of wasting actions, Whirling Throw is a great choice. And there are a lot of other tricks in Wrestler Archetype for those that want to build more damage, a lot of variety in here, but these are like the key things that I want to make you aware of. Because I feel like this archetype is very underrated in terms of how people build tanks. Because I still see a lot of people thinking of tanks as the weapon users that are standing in the front lines and just bop bop bop. But I really feel that with grapplers, you can give your GM a much larger migraine, much faster, or rather, much slower, because this fight isn't ending anytime soon. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off on this video, and if your GM hates you now, go give me a thank you note in the comments below. Peace.